What President Trump must not understand, must actually find kind of humorous, is that while he wants to take jobs from other countries and give them to Americans, he sees here in Canada a Prime Minister that wants to help him do it. Yeah. Let's review the track record. He brought in a massive tax on energy that he wants to quadruple, which will drive our trucking, manufacturing, factories, and other businesses abroad. He raised taxes on investment. He's blocked key energy projects, and he's shipped $500 billion down to the United States. Is the Prime Minister auditioning to be the Secretary of Job Creation in the United States?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Leader of the Opposition needs to get his facts straight. In the 9 years since we took office, foreign direct investment has increased by 60% in this country, so much so that we are now #1 per capita for foreign direct investment last year in the G20. Mr. Speaker, we continue to work hand in hand with the United States, with whatever administration, to protect jobs, to grow our economies. But what the American government will not understand is why the Conservative leader continues to refuse to get the security clearance necessary to protect Canadians.
It's time to move on.
Foreign interference.
Get a life. Move on. New topic.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, 10 years ago, our per capita GDP, that's income per person, was equal to that in the United States. The New York Times said Canadians were richer and our workers were making more money. But since that time, the American economy has grown by 18% per person. Ooh. And in Canada, it's actually smaller. We've had the worst per capita GDP decline of any G7 country since the year before COVID, all after this Prime Minister hiked taxes on investment, on work, on business, and unleashed a wicked attack on our energy sector. Again, why is it that he keeps trying to create jobs for Americans? Why don't we bring the jobs home?
Let's put some W's in the chat. That was a good one.
Prime Minister.
And Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservative leader cherry-picking his numbers. The reality is the IMF predicts Canada have stronger economic growth next year than the United States.
Nobody believes you.
What he is
Full stop. Oh, it must be true.
Talk down our economy and pretend that maybe he's going to be able to deal with an American government that will not understand why he dropped defense spending to below 1% of GDP when he was last around the cabinet table, why he continues to refuse to get the necessary security clearance to get the briefings to keep his own caucus safe, much less all Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I can't think of anyone who would more favor quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre in Canada than this Prime Minister. Right. Well, maybe
That's
there's
crazy.
one person.
Right.
I think perhaps President Trump wouldn't mind, because of course it will mean our trucking companies, our factories, our mines will all shut down and go south of the border where they will pay zero carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, we have enough to worry about with President Trump potentially imposing tariffs on Canadian companies. Why would our government impose tariffs on ourselves?
That's a good way of putting it.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition demonstrates that he has no understanding that the only way to build a stronger economy for the future is also to protect the environment at the same time, while putting more money back in the pockets of Canadians. The Canada Carbon Rebate puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians.
Oh, come on.
According to top environmentalists across the country. We're putting
Sudanese, Trudeau.
that the Leader of the Opposition wants to take away at a time where investments in jobs, in growth, in the future is more important than ever before.
Yeah, right.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, even the opposition leader is concerned about President Trump's economic policies. There must be a problem here. A problem with trade, a problem with supply management, with aluminum, with softwood lumber. Coming back to supply management, isn't it time to urgently protect supply management and pass C-282? And he should call on his senators to pass that bill. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I've been saying from the outset, we agree with that bill, and we are trying to make sure it passes through the Senate. We need to show how firm we are about supply management, about our support for it. We've always stood up for it. We're the government that promised to never give up anything in any future trade deals when it comes to supply management. And we're going to keep our word. I'm glad that the Bloc is supporting us in that endeavor, and we will continue to protect our supply-managed farmers. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. The comparison between the government's will and firmness and its actual results is pretty obvious. A lot of economists say that the economic policies of Republicans will cause inflation. Isn't it time to urgently protect the purchasing power of those aged 65 to 74 by restoring equity within the OAS for everyone, as the Bloc is demanding? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we all know how global inflation has been difficult for Canadians, particularly for seniors, and that's why, as a government, we worked so hard to bring inflation down in Canada faster than in the U.S. and in other parts of the world. And that's also why interest rates have gone down quicker in Quebec than in other parts of the world. We will continue to be a government that manages public finances responsibly in order to make sure that people can continue to enjoy lower interest rates, and we will continue to...
He's going to handle our money responsibly.
Like
Don't worry, guys.
Care and farmer care that will help seniors too.
Don't worry about what he's done.
It's
all going to change.
Having capitulated and allowed President Trump to reimpose the softwood lumber tariffs that Stephen Harper had taken off, and now Biden having doubled those tariffs, our softwood industry hemorrhaging jobs. One way to boost the industry is to build some homes. It turns out I've got a common sense plan to cut the wasteful bureaucracy that has built zero homes and use the savings to axe the sales tax and boost home building by 30,000 new homes per year. Wow. Will the Prime Minister accept my common sense?
Dude, he said that like Trump. 30,000 homes.
Prime Minister.
Per year.
With the Leader of the Opposition's so-called plan is that it actually cuts billions of dollars of investments from municipalities across the country who are counting on it to build hundreds and even thousands of units of housing that Canadians so desperately need. His plan is, once again, cuts and austerity, fights with municipalities, fights with the provinces, not building the homes that matter for Canadians. Once again, he's completely out to lunch, demonstrating an unwillingness to help Canadians.
He's not out to lunch. He can't afford it.
To help himself.
He's out to snack.
Tax.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, he's doubled housing costs, and Canada has the fewest homes per capita of any country in the G7. Maybe it's because his housing minister said of these $8 billion of bureaucracies, quote, the Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't go towards the cost of building houses. It actually doesn't lead to the construction of specific homes. The Housing Accelerator doesn't actually fund directly building homes. And it's built zero homes. Zero homes built with this bureaucracy. So why not follow my common sense plan to axe the sales tax and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, 18 Conservative caucus members stood up and asked for housing investments in their municipalities across the country from this Housing Accelerator Fund that he is promising to cut. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to channel my old job as a school teacher. The Leader of the Opposition actually spent a lot of time and effort rooting out which 18 members had asked for this money for their municipalities for housing. If he spent half as much time rooting out foreign interference as he did rooting out people who are asking for more housing, we might be better off as a country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, these MPs were just trying to solve the case of unsolved mysteries.
Yes.
Where are all these homes? They said, could you point out any one of them? And so they wrote the minister 18 letters, and he got 18 letters, and he couldn't respond with even one home that his $8 billion bureaucracy has built. All these 18 MPs tried to help the hopeless minister. So let me try again with a real plan to build the homes. Axe the tax.
Axe the tax. I want to hear Pierre say, build a wall. I'm going to lose it if he does.
Mr. Speaker, the MP for St. Albert Edmonton asked, the requested federal funding is critical to making this needed development a reality, a development that will help address the significant shortage of affordable housing options in the community. At the same time, the mayor of Butternut Valley in New Brunswick pointed out that this is a program we need, and even the local MP had said this funding will provide much needed housing in the city.
All right, let's go, Pierre.
I don't like to interrupt the Prime Minister. He does have time left on his clock, but it was difficult for the Chair to decipher what was being said. I'm going to ask the Honourable Member to take it for the last 15
To be honest, I didn't even really hear it, and I don't care.
Hear what is happening or what the question is being answered. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the MP for Fundy Royal wrote, this half funding will provide much needed housing in this area. So much so that when the Leader of the Opposition announced he would cancel it, the Mayor of Butternut Valley in that riding, Alan Brown, responded very strongly that this money will help build homes. And why is the Conservative Leader blocking it?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, he's got lots of politicians that love to receive other people's money, but he doesn't have any homes to show for it. And listen, he's too afraid to have a carbon tax election. Right. Let's have a compromise here. Why don't we have a housing tax election? Here's how it would work. The MDP Liberals will campaign on giving the billions more to bureaucracies, and we'll campaign on a plan to axe the tax and build the homes. What do you say? Housing tax?
No. I mean, it doesn't matter what he calls it. Election is an election. Could be a maple syrup election. It's still an election for the same thing. But that's funny.
Order.
He's not muting the mic.
Order.
He's not muting the mic. Look at that. He knows I'm going to write another strong-worded petition.
Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the only so-called plan the Leader of the Opposition put forward is a plan for cuts and austerity, a plan to cut billions of dollars of investments that are needed by municipalities to unlock the building of thousands of homes. Why doesn't he want to see thousands of homes built across the country? Because he'd rather instrumentalize for his own political gain the sufferings and the challenges facing by Canadians rather than to solve the challenges. Just like he refuses to solve the challenge of foreign interference in his own caucus by refusing to get the necessary security briefings and security clearance that'll keep his caucus and Canadians safe.
Look at the lack of enthusiasm by the Liberals.
You're losing your caucus.
You're losing your caucus.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby
That's
South.
what someone just echoed.
The Liberals continue to break their promise to eliminate the marriage after 60 pension clause. They label women as gold diggers and push veterans and their families into poverty.
Shame.
This government announced $150 million for veterans 5 years ago, but hasn't spent a single penny. Veterans and their families are owed a good life. Will the Prime Minister eliminate this sexist, archaic pension clause, or does he still believe veterans are asking for too much?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've invested over $11 billion in supports for veterans over the past years after the Conservative
Bro, didn't you
government
give like an
demonstrated that they
actual
were
terrorist
nickel-and-diming
like $10 million or something?
co-ops, shuttering 9 veteran service centers, firing thousands of people working to directly support veterans. We've been there for our veterans. We will continue to invest in supports for them. We will continue to protect them from the Conservative cuts. We will be there to honor and recognize their service, not just this week on Veterans Week, but every single week throughout the year.
A lot of veterans do not like Justin Trudeau.
The honourable member from Nunavut.
More and more Indigenous people are still dying at the hands of law enforcement. Despite urgent calls to save lives, the Liberals have done nothing. I grieve with the Inuit family in Sudluit, Nunavik, after their son Joshua was killed. We need justice for twins Joshua and Garnet Papigatuk. We need more de-escalation tactics and Indigenous-led crisis response teams. When will this government listen to the urgent demands from Indigenous peoples so they can live in safe communities?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Kuyanamik, for my colleague's question, we know how difficult situations in
9 years,
Indigenous communities.
and there's still Indigenous communities that don't have clean drinking water because of you.
We've tripled investments into Indigenous communities since 2015, with $32 billion in investments expected in 2024, 2025 alone. We know there is much more to do, including even stronger partnerships on Indigenous policing, on community security, community safety, on housing, on supports for young people. There is much more to do. We will continue to work hand in hand, work with local governments and Indigenous governments to get it done.
Yeah, even Indigenous fans don't like you, buddy.
Mr. Speaker, last year we signed an historic agreement with Quebec in order to mobilize joint investments of $1.8 billion in affordable housing. As part of the Housing Accelerator Fund, and last week, the Conservative leader announced his intent to cut this fund and to tear up our agreement with Quebec, jeopardizing all the housing projects. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I'd like to thank my colleague from Malcorel-Fortin. The Conservatives' plan is to cancel housing projects across the country. In Quebec, its solution is to tear up the agreement we signed with that province to the tune of $900 million for affordable housing projects. We're talking about some 8,000 of those projects. Even the Minister of Finance Quebec thinks that this Conservative leader is costly and inefficient. So we can't count on, Quebecers cannot count on the Conservative leader because all he will do is cut, cut, cut. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Prime Minister capitulated and allowed Trump to reimpose tariffs. And there are 3 sawmills in Saguenay that had to shut down. One way of stimulating the demand for Canadian lumber is by building homes. But the Prime Minister is fighting to build bureaucracy. And so they're not building houses at all. I proposed the idea of removing the GST on new homes, which would allow for the building of 30,000 some homes. Would he call an election to make sure that the GST can be removed from new homes? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers see very clearly what this Conservative Party is trying to do. It is trying to cut everywhere and ensure an austerity plan. The Conservative leader would cut $900 million of joint investments with Quebec to create some 8,000 affordable homes. That is what he wants to do. He just wants cuts for Quebecers. He is throwing an agreement into the garbage. He's petty politicking, and that's not what Quebecers need. They need investments and they need homes, and that's what he wants to cut. Before Continuing with the Leader of the Opposition, I would just like to remind all members, and I've seen this on both sides, please do not rise too much before the Speaker recognizes you because it distracts me somewhat. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.